Hey guys, Level Cap and Luton here with an episode of On the Level. Now, as you may know, Gamescom has been going on in Germany. There is a ton, an absolute ton of information coming out of there. Live streams, trailers, videos, all this stuff coming out on YouTube and the internet. We have a lot of information, and I think we're going to start off with talking about the new map and perhaps some of the new maps we've actually seen in the trailer. So, Luton, what do you think about the Paracel Island or Paracel Storm?
It's just totally blown everyone away. I mean, it's such an amazing product so far. And the trailer they put together, it's got to be one of the best trailers that we've seen in so long from DICE. I mean, their stuff is always great, but this is really up the game. It's absolutely amazing. Paracel Storm itself as a map, it's just really, really interesting. And it's really great to have that kind of centralized island, and then you have kind of smaller islands dotted around. It's just providing a whole new sort of feeling for the combat there. And the water-based naval combat, it's something that I've wanted to see for quite a while, because we have spoken before, and I think other people have spoken before, about bringing that back.
Yes.
Yeah, and it's just like, getting the boats in and being able to sort of, you can imagine you're kind of coming along an island, and then a boat pulls up, you jump in on that boat, you move forward, you jump off on the next point, and you get that kind of really interesting marine-based combat happening. It's something that I think people wanted to see for ages, and the way it's mixed in and with Battlefield 4, and then you got Levolution on top, it's going to be really, really awesome. I can't wait to see how people get hands-on with it, and whether it's going to be in the beta.
Yeah, I think that was one of the things that I was more skeptical with, because in those like little teaser trailers where they showed like a propeller spin up,
Yeah.
and you're thinking, okay, there's going to be water vehicles in Battlefield 4. I was very skeptical because I'm just thinking Battlefield 1942, giant battleships destroying everything. But these small attack craft, they got the jet ski, they got the mid-size rigid hold boat, and then they have the larger patrol boats. And just that like variability of aquatic vehicles that just gives you so many options for attacking targets and having naval warfare. It looks like it's going to be a lot of fun. And what do you think about the water physics that they have in there? I mean, it's unreal.
Yeah, the water physics are just unbelievable. It's like nothing you've ever seen before. And, it was interesting to see from like Shanghai, where it was kind of flat. We didn't really see too much. I mean, it looked awesome the way they were moving around and bumping into things, etc. But we really didn't see too much of it. But now with Paracel Storm, you've got these huge rolling waves and the boats flying over the top of them, jumping in. It really, really does change up the game. And then there's the whole tactical ability with it as well. Now, Lars G mentioned about this, the fact that you can actually use the waves themselves as sort of tactical defense. You can imagine that, in the past, when we look at maybe like no-take canals and things like that, when you have to approach the base, it can be totally flat and they can see you coming a mile away. You can just get picked off because you have no cover there whatsoever. You have to cross this expanse of water. But now, with the dynamic weather and with the Frostbite 3, you have these huge rolling waves, and you can actually use them to approach. So you can imagine the start of a round maybe is totally flat. You maybe have a hard time getting up there. They're picking you off as you're coming in, but then the weather changes up and you can start using that water and the waves to just pull in there, roll in, and it really is going to provide just a completely new sort of tactical element there. It's going to be really interesting to see how that kind of integrates into the game. But overall, the water, I mean, it really is just unbelievable. I've never seen anything like it. And like I say, when you see it at such a huge scale, like a grand scale, massive rolling waves, like the long cinematic shots, it's unbelievable.
Yeah, I think the weather change and sort of how that ties into just how every map seems to have two modes, depending on the weather changing, or if the skyscraper comes down in Shanghai and it makes everything smoky. The fact that it changes up certain vehicles or certain weapons are going to be more effective before, and then certain things are going to be more effective after. In that little preview trailer of Levolution, we see evidence that a dam breaks open in one of the maps and it floods the streets. And then all of a sudden you see boats going down these streetways. So if one team was dominating with ground vehicles before, now the other team that was dominating on water vehicles could move in and take that part of the map. And it almost feels like that's what they're trying to do with every map. Like when the skyscraper comes down in Siege of Shanghai, it smokes everything up. So if you have had air superiority before, now you can't really see ground targets very well at all. So I just love that they're trying to take that sort of in-depth approach to every map, like to keep it from getting stagnant. One strategy is not going to work for the entire round. You're going to have to change it up.
Yeah, and they said that they wanted to have Levolution like in each map. That's something they said was that they wanted to see Levolution in each map in the game, but they didn't want it to be kind of overbearing. They didn't want it to be so prominent that it kind of took away from everything else that's happening on. So they wanted to be sort of sympathetic, and they wanted also to make sure that each Levolution event within the maps was unique. So it wasn't kind of like, okay, we've just built the building for Shanghai, yeah, and
Hmm.
now we're going to sort of be like, okay, we built that building so we can put it in somewhere else. They wanted to sort of develop them for each map, so we're going to see that as we go forward into the game. But they mentioned as well about how they didn't want Levolution to become like the sole focus of every single map, you know?
Yeah.
They want it to be sort of part of the map and things that can happen there. But they didn't want people to kind of go running off after the event every single time, you know? It should be just part of the map. So, you know, if suddenly it really intense combat starts happening, imagine this sort of the building on Shanghai, you know, maybe that becomes like a real focal point for the teams. They're really battling it out. And then as a result of that, the building comes crashing down because people are blowing it up and fighting, etc., etc. And I think that's how it will play out. You're not going to see people go charging off because there's going to be more important things happening. And this is kind of what they said was on certain maps, the focus of your objective is going to be away from where the Levolution event is. And it's going to be a bit stupid, really, for people to go running off to do that. It won't really make a lot of sense. Some people may do that. But for most games, I think that's not really how it's going to pan out. People are going to be fighting and moving to where they need to be and not necessarily chasing after these things. But it's so awesome to see like Levolution in action and the things that they can do. And we've only seen a couple of things so far. I can only imagine what else they're going to have, what they can show us. It really beggars. I mean, we've seen the building coming down, we have that huge warship crashing in, and then, of course, we've got the dam coming down as well and flooding the city. And that's going to be amazing as well. I mean, it's like Venice. These boats are like crashing down through. It's so interesting that you could go from sort of urban warfare to suddenly having huge boats piling through.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, you know, like that water map and other things like that, those are very cool, the big events, but I think they did such a good job of integrating all the small stuff. You know, we've all seen the tank come down through the city street after you take out the support. There's a little bit of footage showing the metro redesign, and there's like a
Mm.
support beam being taken out in the new metro and the ceiling coming crashing down. Like those little bits of Levolution, you know, aside from giant skyscrapers and destroyers crashing into the ground, I think that's going to be more impactful in the long run. And honestly, I think it's like the little things that matter. I think
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
going to be the most important part of Levolution in BF4, and I can't wait to like start turning off lights, like opening up ramps to get into buildings different ways. Like it just looks like a blast.
Yeah, those small things are the really immersive things. They're the things that matter. But yeah, like we talk about the kind of turning off of things, and you could see like the shutters coming down, the lights going off, but then also the bollards. You know, you could turn the
Hmm.
bollards come up, and that's a defensive thing. What's so interesting about that is you can imagine that on maps like, for example, Seine Crossing, we know that on certain maps people can really just drive the vehicles straight up to the objective. They just power them in there, they put them straight onto the objective, the MCOM or whatever, and you know, it can be a kind of frustrating thing. But now you have this kind of passive option. You can turn on the bollards, it's going to stop those vehicles coming up there, and it suddenly means that, hey, the team has to think about how they want to play this. They can't move that vehicle up. It's not an option anymore. So they have to think of other options. They have to think of what else they can do. The team's going to have to flank around. They're going to have to park that vehicle in a position where it can cover. So it adds this,
Yep.
you know, this different dimension there. I really love the idea as well that it's like a kind of passive thing. You know, by turning on a button or whatever, it's a passive thing. It's not an aggressive thing. So it's not like an action that instigates,
Yeah,
you
yeah.
know, like a full on attack to the enemy. It's a passive thing where they can do an action which alters the situation, makes the enemy team think, okay, well now we have to do something else. But like I say, it's not just a weapon, which is great. You know, it encourages intelligent gameplay. It means people have to think around their situation rather than just being like tick for tat, you know, fighting back all the
Yeah.
time. So that's a really great thing. And I think, like you say, these smaller things are the things that really matter in the long term. Levolution is amazing, and we see like these huge changes in the battle, but it's always the small things that come down, and that's really what we're going to have to look into. How much of an impact are these smaller elements going to have in the game long
Yeah,
term?
it seems to me that the level designers are thinking in a way where they don't want what is happening in Battlefield 3 to currently happen, where one sort of force can dominate the map, like an air force,
Yeah.
a armor force, or an infantry force. Seems like they want to make it so they have to work together. So, like with those pylons, the tank cannot defeat those on its own. I mean, it can try and get out of the driver's seat and turn him off, but he's probably going to get shot. So,
Mm.
you have to have infantry working together with armor. And it seems like they're trying to approach a lot of maps like that. You can't just have an awesome jet pilot that's gonna dominate the whole round because now you got boats with tons of anti-air on them, you know. So it's going to be a combination. You have to have a good navy now to back up your good air force in the Parasol Storm map. So that looks like it's just a really good way to balance things out and not make it so much a rock paper scissors style game, but now you're going to need rock and paper to defeat scissors or something.
Yeah, definitely. But I mean, as well, I saw Lars Gustafsson and he spoke about this, about the rock, paper, scissors thing. And this is such a core aspect of Battlefield. It's always been about certain classes having certain advantages over one another. And, I was a bit worried about this. I was a bit worried about this going into Battlefield 4 because there was so much talk about kind of customization and things. I was really worried that it was going to like muddy the water a bit, and that, there's going to be so much confusion, and there wouldn't be sort of the defined roles that we've always seen before. But he did. He actually used the phrase. He was like, "We want the rock paper scissors going on. It's really important to us to keep that and to keep the balance." So I felt a little bit better about that. And also, when we come to the field upgrades, this was the same kind of deal. I was very worried with the field upgrades that the specializations were going to be too generalized. It wasn't going to encourage a certain style of gameplay. But what actually we've seen is that the field upgrades actually help to sort of focus down a class. So, for example, with the engineer, you can focus down your field upgrade into being awesome repair. You can be a really great engineer repairing, or you can be an excellent vehicle killer. So, really great that what it's doing is essentially kind of focusing you down, just making you like, a more elite version of the current class that you're playing. So I feel a lot better about that. I think that going into the game in Battlefield 4, they've actually done a really great thing.
Yeah.
So it gives you more flexibility, more options in terms of what weapons you can take. But at the same time, they're focusing you down, making you be that kind of more specialist role. So we still have the rock, paper, scissors going on. So I'm really, really pleased about that. And really excited about how they've balanced up the classes going into the game. Okay, so let's talk a little bit more about the game mode. So we'll start off with it's Obliteration, which is a brand new game mode. What do you feel about this? What do you think about this game mode?
At first, I'll admit I was kind of like thinking that this was a little bit too complicated and that people are just kind of gonna ignore it because Conquest is so much simpler, Rush is so much simpler. You just have your objective, you go there, you arm it, and you're good to go, or you capture the flag. Obliteration, you now have the bomb in the center of the map. Both teams are rushing for it. Now, if somebody gets it, he's visible to everyone. So he's sort of like, his life expectancy.
And he's flashing.
Yes, his life expectancy goes way down. And apparently, if you hit him with like an explosive round, he explodes. So there's a lot of stuff that you can do to get rid of the bomb guy. But it does actually look interesting how they have the 3 key objectives, and the more that you destroy, all of a sudden the defensive team doesn't have to worry about as many. So technically it should get harder and harder to continue destroying your opponent's team's objectives. I think it could be fun. Ultimately, I think we're going to still see a lot of Conquest, a lot of Rush.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on Obliteration?
It's a really interesting game mode. I like it a lot. I feel there's a few things that could have been done a little bit better, but I'm probably being just typically too critical. One thing I thought was a bit weird was like once you pick up the bomb, that's it. It's like stuck on you. You can't drop it, you can't pass it. It's on you, and you either plant or die. That's basically your options. I really would have liked the fact that you could maybe drop it, pass it to another player or something like that. Maybe you go to pick it up because there's nobody else around at the time. Maybe you're like, for example, support or something. You got a big ass LMG. There's nobody nearby, and you're like, okay, crap, I've got to pick this thing up. You get it start to move, but then maybe there's a bit more of a lightweight, fast sort of assault class who would be much better suited to being the kind of carrier. But you can't, you have to sort of stay carrying it. You can't pass it to a teammate. So that's a bit of a shame. Like you say, it is kind of interesting. You become this kind of flashing beacon on the map. You're flashing red, you're marked, everybody knows where you are. You've got like the entire team coming for you. And it really is going to be a sort of really crazy, intense rush sort of situation where like literally people just come in for you, gun in for you. So I think it will be quite terrifying being the bomb carrier as such. But yeah, I like it as a game mode. I think it's been really intense. It's very fast to plant and destroy the bomb. So once you get it in there, it goes down real fast. I actually asked about this. I posted it out and said, I put it on Twitter and said, I think it looks to be, I sort of estimated it's about half the time for an MCOM to go down. So just imagine what that is. It's not very long. And then one of the DICE guys got back to me and said, yeah, it's half the time of an MCOM. So it's half the time for an MCOM from when you plant to when it gets destroyed. So it's really, really not very long. So when those bombs get planted, you need to have people nearby to defuse it, or literally you've got no chance whatsoever. And when it gets planted, you need to start moving on it right there and then. There's no kind of like try to clear them or worry. You've got to get on it. You've got to get in it right there. And I think that kind of is what sort of epitomizes that game mode. It's really intense. It's really fast. And from the stream when they were playing, the game mode was over so fast. Literally, Corey and Alex, when they were casting, they were talking about the game mode whilst it was happening, and they'd be like, "Oh yeah, we got some obliteration and blah blah blah," and they get into the game, and then it's nearly over. And most of the games were lasting about 5 minutes, so it's not a kind of drawn out affair. It's pretty intense, but I guess it comes down to the teams, how they play out. That's really going to be the big factor.
Yeah.
Is how those teams play out. Do they play super defensive? Do they play super aggressive? It's really going to come down to that. But it's good to have something new. It's good to have something really sort of interesting, dynamic, and really sort of change it up. So yeah, it's a welcome change, I think, into the thing. What do you think about having domination back in? Obviously, it was from really close quarters, and now they've said they're going to bring that back in as a main game mode. What do you feel about that for sort of standardized maps?
I think it's fine. Domination, in my opinion, I mean, by nature, it's not really a balanced game unless they try and make it balanced, where typically you had one side that always had a setup spawn, so you could
Mm.
never lose your spawn. You could always keep attacking. But if you have a side that doesn't have a setup spawn, where it can actually lose if you lose all the points, then you basically have a game of imbalance. And what I've noticed is a growing trend is people don't want to play the exact same game mode two times in a row, just switching the sides. Like it
Mm.
sort of works with Rush every now
Yeah,
and then, but everybody's so impatient these days that you want to move on to something new, something different.
yeah.
So is if the map is super imbalanced for one side, then I could see that being an issue for, it's like when the round starts, everybody's like, I hope I'm on the attacking team. I hope I'm on the attacking team or the one that's got the attack helicopter or whatever.
Yeah.
And then you're not, and you only get one round of that. Like I could see that potentially being an issue.
Yeah,
Um,
I think it depends on how the maps play out, because most of the time when you're playing domination on close quarters, the maps tend to be kind of they're kind of fairly equal all around. They tend to be kind of quite intense, and a lot of the players sort of move around a lot because it's a much kind of smaller game mode. I'm going to be curious how they implement it into the game. I think it's going to matter a lot on what area of a map they have designated as the domination area, because like you say, if you end up in a kind of metro situation where that's, one side has a clear advantage, yeah, it's going to be a pain. But if they're kind of more even all around, it's just going to have that kind of fluid, fast gameplay. But again, I think it is good to give people options. I often said that with domination, it was a great game mode to warm up with. So you'd play like a couple of rounds because it's really sort of furious. It gets your kind of gets your sort of twitch accuracy up real quick. You can get on targets really good, and then you take that into your standard Conquest Rush game modes. So you've kind of warmed up nicely with some sort of fast close quarter matches, and then you get into the sort of main game mode. So yeah, it's a welcome one back for me. Now you wanted to talk about the last game mode, the new one that we've seen as well, didn't you?
yeah, Diffuse, which is basically, I like to call it Counter-Strike. Everybody's referring it to as that COD game mode.
We weren't going to mention that.
No, no COD. Okay, that's the forbidden word here. Diffuse, you got one life. You got one team has to plant a bomb, the other team has to defend a bomb site. If you've ever played Counter-Strike, it's pretty much identical to how that works out. This could actually be pretty exciting for competitive gameplay. It could be a great mode for competitive gameplay because obviously it worked out in Counter-Strike very well. Counter-Strike had many years of serious competitive gameplay. So we already know it's balanced and works well for competition. So I can see that as being a lot of fun. As for casual play, I seeing it being perhaps a little bit less fun because everybody wants their multiple lives. But at the same time, having one life really does change things up enough to the point where you're so afraid to die because you don't want to wait around for 2 or 3 minutes if the round still goes on, that you play much more cautiously. So rather than having the guy bunny hopping around with his machine gun, you're probably going to have people checking every corner, working
Mm.
together, making sure that they throw flashbangs at the right time and covering each other to achieve the objective, which is you see it a little bit in Battlefield 3 right now, but it's definitely more aggressive and a little bit more run and gun and a little bit more loose with the gameplay. So Diffuse would definitely tighten things up. So it would definitely be very cool to watch as a spectator sport. As
Mm.
a casual game mode, it might be a little bit less successful, but I'm really happy that they're bringing it in because I think
Yeah.
most shooters should have a game mode like this.
Yeah, that's what I want to ask you. do you really feel like it's the right thing to bring into Battlefield? Because I think I need to ask that question because I think people will be asking that question. Is that Battlefield for such a long time has been this open vehicle-based game which has really set itself apart from many other sort of titles in the same area, and I think a lot of people are going to be asking the question. Now, clearly, it's going to be good for competitive, like you say. It's going to be really good for competitive, good for esports because it's a game mode that is historically well known to be great for that kind of thing. Now, something I had said is that with Battlefield 3, we really saw such improvement with the gunplay, and I found that the Battlefield gunplay became some of the most intense, balanced, really entertaining gunplay that we've
I
had.
agree.
And so I don't really personally see any issue with focusing on more infantry-based situations. That's why I like Domination, because it has really great features. It's just really fun. But people are going to ask that question: is it the right thing to come into Battlefield? Do you think it's the right thing to bring in?
Yeah, absolutely. I think Dice has done such a good job with perfecting their gunplay, as you said, that they sort of deserve to have an infantry only gameplay. And if you look at what people are playing right now, there are a lot of people who just want to play infantry based maps. And I think it's very important to have that duality in this game right now because there's a huge portion of the market that comes from other shooters that don't have vehicles and they're not as interested in vehicles. They don't want to have to deal with the fact that, oh, hey, a tank's coming down this street and I'm a medic. I can't do anything. I have to run away. People don't like that. They like to be able to approach every situation as if they have an option and that they don't necessarily have to rely on their team. It's just a simple fact of shooters these days is you have to have those infantry only game modes, I think, to really be competitive. Now, obviously, Battlefield stands aside because it does vehicle combat so well, but I really think they've taken their infantry combat above and beyond any other shooter right now. So without a doubt, they deserve that infantry only game mode. And it's not to say that Diffuse will be infantry only. We haven't actually ruled out the possibility that there aren't going to be vehicles in it.
Yeah, yeah.
However, I do think it will be primarily infantry.
Well, and talking about the gunplay, it does lead us nicely into the last thing, which is, some of the new site mechanical changes. And we've talked about how, DICE have perfected their gunplay, and they really have. I don't think you can really get gunplay like it in any other game. And in Battlefield 4, from what we have seen, it's only going to be even better. And on the massive array of weapons that they're bringing out as well, but also just everything is improved all around. They really have polished it perfectly. Well, I say perfectly. We need to wait and see. We need to get the beta on hand. But from my impression is that it's going very, very well. But with that in hand, there's other things that we can talk about, some small mechanical elements. Now, the tier reload is something we have to talk about really just quickly because it's going to change the way game plays out. And it's a very, very small change, but it's going to have a big impact on the game. Now, do you want to sort of talk people through exactly how that's going to run down, Neville?
Sure. I mean, I don't know the exact mechanics of it, but based on what we've seen in the trailers, if you pop a mag out of your weapon, and you do this in every single shooter game where you have to reload your weapon, you pop the mag out, somebody startles you, and you're a good player, so you switch to your sidearm, take them down with your pistol, and then you switch back to your primary. Well, pretty much every single shooter up until this date just replays that same reload feature. You bring up your primary weapon, the magazine's in it, you have 0 rounds, and then you have to go ahead and start the reload process again. Well, now, if you've already completed the mag removal process, it saves that progress in the game. So you go back to your weapon, the mag is out. Now all you got to do is put a mag back in the gun. So that's a very interesting addition. And the one thing that I think people are gonna need some time to get used to is the fact that I'll reload an assault rifle when I have, say, 10 rounds left in the magazine. And if somebody startles me and I switch to the pistol and then switch back to the assault rifle, I still have those 10 rounds left in the magazine in Battlefield 3. So if somebody again startles me, I can shoot them with the 10 rounds left in there. This time when you switch back, you're going to have to finish that reload process. So it is going to change things up minutely, and for the hardcore gamers, it's actually going to be a pretty big change that they're going to have to get used to. But I welcome it. I think it's sort of the evolution of shooters, all these minute changes, these small things that they're doing. This one is going to catch on, and I think you're going to see it in pretty much every other shooter going forward from here on. They're all going to have tier reload systems.
Yeah, definitely. It's going to change the game up so much, and I can't tell you the amount of times where I've been in that exact situation where you're laying down fire on a guy, you're getting low on the rounds, suddenly comes out, you take him down, you switch back, and you get caught out because you weren't able to reload at the certain time. Whereas if you only had to do half that animation, you might be able to actually survive and sort of pick it off. And especially in some of the more, if they're bringing in more infantry-based gameplay, this is going to become even more apparent. It's going to be even more important. So I think it's a really great one to come in. Some other things to
Think
mention.
about LMGs too, just on that
Yeah,
same
sure,
note.
sure, yeah.
A 6-7 second reload time.
Yeah, totally.
You pull the the ammo out of the weapon, take off the box mag, and then somebody startles you. You got to switch to your magnum, take them out, and then you got to start the 7 second reload. Some
Yeah.
maps 7 seconds is you're dead. You can't
Yeah.
get through it again. So being able to save that progress halfway through is going to be huge for support players.
Okay, guys, and we've got one more thing just to talk about at the end here today, and that is the defibs. Now, the defibs are changing. We saw in a video that I made, we were talking about how the charge time has changed. Now, that's actually, you can do a fast charge with the defibs, you can do an instant revive, but you can also do a long charge, which takes 4 whole seconds to get a full charge up. If you do an instant revive, it gets your player up, but only at 20% health. If you do a full charge, that brings them back at 100%. But also, something else we have seen is that defibs also now have a charge pack. You can only get 3 revives out of the defibs. What do you think about this level? It's going to be a bit of a game changer, isn't it?
Yes, this is probably, it seems like something so small and minute tucked away off in the side of the UI there, but this is probably going to be one of the biggest changes that impacts actual gameplay out of anything coming in Battlefield 4. And it feels silly because it's so small, but it really is a huge deal. The medic class or the assault class has been the most popular class because he can instantaneously bring his entire squad back to life in about 3 seconds at full health, and that's just something that's always irked me as being so ridiculously powerful. And it's comical, like even back in Battlefield 2, watching one guy revive everyone. So these changes here, having limited revives is great. Means you can't just constantly keep bringing people back to life. No more medic trains, as they call them, where you just have 4 medics going around keeping each other alive forever. Um, the quick revive is a really interesting mechanic. Now, people are saying, "Oh, it's not going to work out because if you quick revive somebody, then you beat out the guy who takes the time to do the long revive, and you get the same amount of points." But here's the thing that I actually like about this is if you're in a crazy situation and you want to just go for that quick revive, hoping that your squad mate can maybe get behind cover, then it's fine for that situation. But if you're a skilled assault player and you see your down teammate off in the distance, you can bring out your defibs ahead of time, charge them. If you time it perfectly, that 4 second charge time
Yep.
should be ready by the time you get to your squad mate, and you can get him a nice full 100% revive. And that's going to be skill being put back into the aspect of reviving players.
That's a really good point. Adding actual skill back into the revives. I think that's something we haven't seen for a really long time, is going to be actually having skill put back into the defibs. And I think if people can get those timings right, it's a complete game changer. But you're going to see so much less of the kind of crazy kills. And those charge packs, that's going to be the key, because people cannot spam it anymore. They have to pick and choose. They've only got 3 charges. It's going to be a massive change to the game.
Yeah. So this is, I'll just say it again. This is probably the biggest bit of news coming out in terms of game balance, like the charge backs, the charge time, how much health you get revived with. It's all pretty awesome. I think that pretty much wraps it up for what we want to talk about today. We're going to have another On the Level coming out soon where we're going to really get into some other minute details of the game. Thanks for watching, guys, and we'll see you next time. This is Luton and Level Cap signing off.